every time I drive around, guys. What is going on this road right now? Y'all see this? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Motorfest. So I never got the 1190 RC8 R Power Track Edition back in the day. Kind of insane considering how old this bike actually is. And well, guys, it does turn out you did indeed get this thing instantly on Motorfest for that matter. What's kind of cool also is the official colors are indeed purple. If you are wondering, I do believe some of that actually goes back to like the old days of KTM, where they actually were using purple colors on their bikes, which you can see on the new dirt bikes. So I would say that's going to be a pretty cool thing with like the heritage of KTM, but it is kind of insane, guys. I never actually got this bike back then, and I did not realize I basically got it instantly in Motorfest. So I was like, you know what? Let's go drive this thing into a quick video with it and really see what this thing can actually do. So similar to basically every other racing vehicle in this class as well, you also can't do much of anything to it besides like vanities and or the colors. So you're obviously going to be very limited with this bike, but I have to admit, guys, riding this thing for a bit and or looking at it, I really do love the way this thing does look. Now, obviously, it's basically an upgraded version and or a different looking version of the regular 1190 in this class. So the Power Track Edition is probably going to be a pretty rare bike, though, because obviously many people most likely don't have it. And if you are wondering, the biggest differences is obviously going to be the main livery on the bike. The rest of it, I would say, is probably going to almost look identical. I would say that's probably going to make a lot of sense considering this is basically an upgraded version of that bike with like a different livery, so it isn't going to be like a completely different model, but I would say overall, guys, it does look pretty dang awesome. Now, I have to admit, guys, I am really liking the way this bike does look. Like, having that blacked out livery and or like the orange frame looks awesome. And obviously, with it being a KTM, an orange frame is always going to be a must. And I would say many people definitely would agree with that. But I could say, guys, I am going to be slightly biased on the way that I do like the way the 1190 does look. And that's probably going to come down to the fact that I indeed do ride a KTM in real life. So I guess I can be slightly biased in that matter. Don't get me wrong though, I obviously love other motorcycles, but I really do love the way KTM's look overall. Not only that, this thing is obviously going to be a twin, and it sounds awesome. And then of course, guys, looking at the RC8 here in first person, the screen is obviously going to be the exact same as the other one. You will indeed have like the RPM reader on the top, which I would say is pretty dang awesome. We obviously have the speed there in kilometers, a gear indicator, and a temperature of 105, which would never happen on a motorcycle. Now, of course, when testing out the 1190 RC, I obviously have to do a top speed test with it. Now, do keep in mind, guys, the racing bikes and or like the touring bikes back on the Crew 2 obviously weren't as quick as many of the cars actually were. So I did notice in this game, many of the racing bikes tend to be like 30 miles per hour slower, which I would say is probably going to be a good thing. That way they can obviously separate like the bikes from the cars and like summits, and that way you could actually run like different vehicles for that matter. But one thing I did notice, guys, this bike is going to hit around 218 miles per hour. Of course, not using and or like slipstreaming somebody, which I have noticed. At least in the events, the bikes do like 225 miles an hour. So testing out the 1190, I figured why not jump into one of the actual like races in the game, and of course being on level 5, you guys will then notice the AI are basically insanely quick, but a few things I did want to touch on. So first question is this going to be like the best bike in the entire racing class? I would probably say no, and the main reason why I say that, guys, if we do look at something like the lovely MotoGP bikes in the game, so we obviously do have like the RC16 in the game now, and of course we also have other bikes like the Suzuki and or the Yamaha as well, and I would say those bikes have a huge advantage overall with like the way that they do turn, and or like the overall agility that those bikes do actually have, obviously going around corners. Also, do not mind me right now, I am not driving all that great, but I would say though, guys, the KTM is still going to be pretty dang good, but it isn't going to have like the overall agility that some of the other bikes may have in this class. So for example, guys, you'll also notice this a lot with like the Suzuki. So I did notice that one summit back then when we were actually having to use those bikes. The Suzuki was honestly insanely good with the way that it did corner, and I did notice being able to fly around corners being that much quicker obviously does help. Now I do want to mention though, I am running pure and or bender on this bike, so it does obviously turn a bit quicker. Now, if you do actually have these perks on some of the other bikes like the Suzuki, that thing is going to be absolutely insane. Now, of course, with this being a racing bike, it obviously does around 225 miles an hour with slipstreaming like the AI here. And I really do find it crazy, guys. Level 5, these guys are honestly way too quick. And on some of the events, I cannot even catch them on many of the areas. So at least I actually passed them there. But one thing I have to admit, though, the 1190 really is going to be a decent bike. Now, it isn't going to be like the best bike in the game. So if you guys did get this thing thinking like, well, I am now going to use this bike for every single race and or event, and for me I would most likely pick like the RC16 and or something like the Suzuki. Even the Yamaha, for that matter, is probably going to be a better option. Now, one thing I did learn, by the way, guys, if you are looking to corner a bit better, even with the KTM here, I would actually recommend being a bit more careful going around these corners. So the first thing obviously is to go around them not slamming the front brake down, which obviously if you do ride motorcycles in real life, you know the front brake is not your friend, especially on corners for that matter. Hitting that, the bike is obviously going to go right toward the ground there. But one thing I did notice though, guys, tapping the rear brake around corners does help a bit. But make sure when actually hitting that though, you don't slam it down and or something like that, because, well, you're obviously going to lose too much speed and or spin out. But I did notice hitting the rear brake around some of these corners does actually help a lot. And I would say with the KTM here, you're probably going to need basically everything you can get. So being able to get more speed around these corners and or the most agility possible is probably going to be one of the best ways to get the most speed out of it. And I also lost. As you guys did see as well, I basically lost that event because I did notice the AI on level 5, you basically have to be perfect. And I did actually run that race a few times with this bike to test it out. It does turn out if you mess up and or go slightly slow in some areas. The AI obviously catch you in every single way, but my overall final conclusions on this, what was that, dude? But my overall thoughts on the KTM though, guys, I have to admit, I do think this bike is honestly going to be insanely decent overall. Is it going to be like the best bike in the class? I would probably say no, but I will be definitely testing out all the racing bikes in the future. So I would say, guys, one of the biggest things about the KTM is probably going to come down to the overall rarity of this bike and how many people don't actually have this thing because of how old it actually is. So I would say that it is obviously going to be one positive thing going for it. But if you are... Every time I drive around, guys, what is going on this road right now? Y'all see this? Anyway, though, guys, let me know your thoughts on the KTM in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more insight.